16 years ago, Wendy Howard moved from Scotland to Portugal as a single mother to go off-grid, grow her own food, build her own shelter, and bring life back to abandoned land in a remote valley in central Portugal. The inland regions became increasingly abandoned over the decades, as the locals went away in search of better opportunity in the cities. Wendy found herself as part of a wave of newcomers who were, for one reason or another, searching for a different way of living. A way of living in tune with the seasons, connected to the soil, air and elements, away from the noise and barriers that modern life has constructed around us and through us, severing our innate connection with the larger entity and living systems of the natural world. I became fascinated by her journey since I first discovered her project, and after visiting for the first time in November last year, I've also spent the last few months living off-grid as her neighbour in the Serra do Açor with the intention of filming and unravelling this story. We shared many conversations in her kitchen that would often enter a space of timelessness, and the diversity of our subjects were in tandem with the biodiversity of the land itself, vast and complex, reaching to breadths and depths, which made it challenging to put into a concise story. I didn't know which direction to take until I received news from Wendy that a few weeks ago, a proposition had emerged for the local mountain to become a development for industrial wind turbines. The entire ridgeline would become transformed from a peaceful landscape into another reminder of our impositions on the biosphere. Wendy is standing in opposition to the proposal, and the story became clear. We're standing at a pivotal point in human history, and this moment is a microcosm of the larger crisis. We are witnessing the hubris of the Anthropocene, where we urgently need to reconcile our destructive ways of living, our inherent contradictions from the systems we exist within, the challenges of supposed green energy, and the incessant and consuming greed which drives the economic machine. I'm embarking on this journey with Wendy to understand her perspective. I want to learn about what led her to this point in time, to explore the local landscape and understand what's at stake, to discover alternatives for how we can coexist on this planet without sacrificing the very conditions which sustain our existence. Not through illusory visions of utopia or idealism, but because we have no other choice but to reimagine our ways of being. This film is itself a question rather than an answer. We do not know where it will lead, much like a root finding its way through the soil, and perhaps through this exploration we can gain clarity and find a better way forward.
We have this fundamental part of our program that says life's a fierce struggle for survival in a hostile world. You can never store enough for a rainy day. You know, what if this happens? It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. We need to make sure we're safe. What else could it be that drives this need for more? It's kind of mindless. And the whole competitive focus of our social construct, you know, it's all, well, you better work hard because that guy's going to get more than you. He's going to take more of your share if you don't work hard and make sure you get your share. So that encourages this competitive dog-eat-dog, frantic struggle for survival, when any objective assessment goes, well, what? Why? Because we have a situation now where everyone should have everything they need. But the ones that have taken the psychopathology to extremes, everything is not enough. I mean, what possible use could someone have for billions of what currency of your choice? You can't spend that in a lifetime. No way. It's far more than what you need. So it's this craving for power. And perhaps that's because we're disconnected from that greater power that we're part of. The life force, God, consciousness, call it whatever you like. It can't be named anyway because we can't really describe it. But we're all part of it. And I guess that disconnection makes people obsess about finding that power in other ways with the mental construct rather than a relationship, a direct relationship. I don't know. Those are just some random thoughts. I don't know how true they are. But it's a super interesting thing to contemplate. Because when you get down into the depths, a lot of our behavior is it's not very rational. And it's in response to something felt, but often that can't be articulated. A lot of the time it's in response to custom and habit, which is actually no good reason to do anything at all, particularly if it's on too large a scale, because then it's out of context, out of place.
Well, it's this principle of natural efficiency versus human engineering efficiency. The engineering efficiency tends to think of things in terms of closed systems and about maximizing the yield from that closed system. In nature, everything's open, completely open. There are no boundaries. So in engineering terms, you would say like an oak tree is insanely wasteful because the number of acorns it produces each year compared to the number of new oak trees that grow from those acorns is vanishingly small. Oh, so inefficient. But that oak tree feeds so many species. So many species, whole ecosystems revolve around those oak trees. And nothing is wasted. Absolutely nothing. Every acorn finds some purpose, even if it's only to rot down and put more organic matter into the soil and feed the microbes and the worms. So in terms of what I've done here, thinking about my engineered systems, is to try and get a little closer to that. So the interesting thing with this very ramshackle hydro, locally made, I mean, you know, in the early days, we got very creative and inventive with stuff. And I like this system because it meant that it was more open, that rather than directing the water down to a turbine and maximizing the yield I could get out of it, nah, I don't need more than I need. So why would I generate power that I have no use for? And the interesting thing is that I stuck a small video of this on my YouTube channel years and years ago, I think about 10 years ago now. And the vast majority of the comments, usually from guys, in fact, probably 99.9% from guys, is like, oh God, that's so inefficient. Look at all that water splashing. You know, you could get so more out of this. And I keep saying, why would I make more than I need? And it's incredible how it doesn't seem to break through. It just doesn't seem to break through. No, but you could make more. I don't want more. You know? It's the same with the solar system. It's a small system. And in winter, sometimes, because the sun disappears behind the ridge, I don't get a lot of sun in winter. Yeah, it might make things a little bit tricky. But, I'm still here. Why would I need more? I don't. So this principle of taking only what you need rather than taking everything is to me super, super important.
What do you think our ancestors were in touch with that we've lost?
Place. They had a real relationship with place. Now we're such a global society, we're jetting all over the place, we live in multiple places as we grow up, often in cities completely disconnected from the natural world. We've lost our roots. And that sense of place keeps you in place, keeps you in an appropriate scale of living. I mean, think about it. How many people can we each know?
it's about a village full. You know, estimates vary, but it's about a village full. And that is that sweet spot in scale where you get the economies of scale so that everyone's not duplicating effort that could be better done collectively, but you haven't got so big that you start to destroy the place in order to keep the culture going. Yeah, for me, it's that sense of rootedness to place and scale. The rootedness to place informs your thinking such that every intervention you make, you're thinking about what it's doing to the context you're in. You're not just imposing something on the landscape, you're working with it, working as it, ideally.
We head out in my old car and begin climbing up the mountain, swerving through hairpin bends, emerging from the shaded canopy of the valleys into the exposed and windswept ridges. The road transitions from smooth asphalt to bumpy gravel track, and the heat wave casts a harsh and unforgiving light across the landscape. At the higher altitude, we begin to see our destination, the mega-turbines in the distance. We pause en route to visit the waterfall of Fraga de Pena, an example of the old ways of how previous inhabitants worked with the landscape, building with the schist stone, directing the water into springs for drinking and channels for milling grain. I begin to see the contrasts of past and present in the context of this region's unique history and culture. I begin to realise what we've lost touch with.
And again, it comes back to scale, because it's these huge scale projects. They're supposed to be eco-friendly, but no, they're doing even more damage because the thinking has just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Nothing's at its appropriate scale. And because we're not in our appropriate scale and place, we're imposing artificial constructs on everything that simply cannot work in that individual context without causing heaps of damage. The resources used to construct these things, the amount of land that's sacrificed to them, it becomes a desert. It becomes a desert. Whereas on a smaller scale, it's workable. I mean, to my mind, this whole energy policy being pursued at the minute is just more of the same that created the problem in the first place. And I think it was Einstein who said you can never solve a problem from the same level of consciousness which created it.
After a long climb up the narrow mountain roads, we reach the ridge near Seposh, where the mega-turbines were recently installed. It feels jarring compared to where we had just been, as if it were a different world entirely. The towering metallic structures dominated the skyline. Below us, the mountainside had been cleared with heavy machinery to plant monocultures of an unknown tree species. In the distance, small villages perched on hilltops seemed minuscule in comparison to what was unfolding around them.
That beautiful little village down there, every house unique, where life has carried on in that way for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. And this wasteland where life is barely holding on. Look at it, you know, it's just barely scraped on the surface. It reminds me when I flew over the Midwest of the US. You know, you fly over that farming part of America, and, you know, life is literally like that south-facing slope there, barely holding on. It broke my heart.
And what could you imagine this landscape being?
Well, look at it, you know, native forest. And yeah, there would be a big difference between the north-facing slopes and the south-facing slopes. But the forests would slowly work their way up from the valleys to the ridges. You know, in Hawaiian culture, it's absolutely essential to maintain your forests on your ridgelines because they protect your water supply. They protect the whole water cycle of the valleys. Here the ridges are bare. And I mean, this is not just industrialization, this is overgrazing for centuries, and partly it's the climate, the incredibly hot summers. I'd love to be a fly on the wall a few centuries ago and see what these hills looked like then.
When I first came, there were no wind turbines, and when they installed them, I guess by and large most of us thought that's a good thing. And then, you know, they're much smaller. They're 2 megawatt turbines. They're half the size of the ones they're now proposing to put along our ridges. Half the size. And they're big enough. I mean, if you go up and walk around underneath them, they're pretty impressive. But like the social sphere, the cultural sphere, how the people coming here have changed over time, I think the same thing applies in a way. It's like you can create a little bubble in the maelstrom temporarily, but so long as the rest of the sea is doing what that sea is doing, you really can't persist. Unless you have a degree of physical isolation that makes it possible, and there are vanishingly few places now where that's possible. So yes, inevitably, something was going to find its way here. And for the locals, it represents a chance to make money in a place where there really isn't any kind of economy. It's been destroyed. Too many people have left. The people coming now, they buy everything online, me included sometimes, because it's just not available here. When I first came, well, yeah, there was still the metal worker in every village, well, not quite every village, but every town at least, the carpenter in every village. You go and speak to the old folk, and all the trades are represented within each village. There's the tailor, the shoemaker, and each village was self-sufficient as an entity unto itself, pretty much. You know, when you threw in the neighbouring villages as well.
And these villagers won't benefit from this, will they?
Of course not. Oh, they might get a token 10,000 euros per windmill per year. 10,000 euros. You know how much one of those things makes in a year? Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million. I mean, this power has nothing to do with the local communities. It's not even for the grid. It's for making hydrogen, we're told. For what? With what tech? Nobody seems to have any idea. They're not on people's doorsteps inviting criticism or examination. They're far away, out of sight, out of mind, in areas that are sparsely populated with people they assume are too simple to know better.
Do you know the expression NIMBY?
Yeah.
Not in my backyard.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
It's a device used by corporate interests to discredit people's legitimate interests in protecting their own backyards against this kind of assault and exploitation. I don't think there's anything wrong with protecting your backyard. Because if you don't, who else?
And if a corporate person came and said, well, that's nice, but it has to happen somewhere, you know, the way.
Why does it have to happen
somewhere? The way
somewhere?
that we're living.
You know, if we had a well thought out renewable energy policy Europe-wide, it would be distributed. You know, the same as blockchain is distributed. It would be a distributed energy system where they tried this in Germany for a while, but you know, each small township, village, small town, large town, has its own energy generation, and in that scale, it's not so obtrusive, it's not so damaging.
And I can't help but feel that growth is just the wrong attitude, you know? The nature of growth cannot be something that is exponential forever.
No, because it's
It changes
cyclical.
form.
It's cyclical. You're born, you grow, and then you stop growing, and then you start to shrink. And eventually you go back to the earth that created you. It's a cycle, it's not a straight line. And our thinking is our linear thinking, that's what's so out of coherence with the world that we are. It's that linear thinking.
And what worries me is people my generation, because they weren't born with it and they don't know what they're missing. And I think some people feel it on a deeper level, and so they look for it and they can't maybe quite articulate it, but then like myself, I find myself here and then I realise it's that feeling of like, oh, that was what was missing, you know? And it still is missing for many people.
Yeah, it is difficult if you've been brought up in a city, because the baseline keeps shifting, doesn't it? I mean, my baseline was a rural market town of the 1960s, just coming out of post-war rationing, where people still did all their own house maintenance, kept chickens, grew vegetable gardens. It was normal. And then it stopped being normal. And you guys got born into a world where it was no longer normal. It's difficult. Because I can't relate. I know I can't relate to what happened before I was born. So yeah, it's difficult.
But that memory is still there, I think. That's the thing, even if it's not an experiential one, it's maybe an ancestral memory.
We're our own worst enemies a lot of the time. We're driven by our assumptions, our ideas, our conditionings, our traumas. And if we chose, we could drop it. I mean, there are some big choices to make in doing so, but it can be dropped.
And what happens when you drop it? For you? What happened?
Peace. Total peace. Peace, contentment. Like nothing really feels weighty and troublesome anymore. I mean, there are things we need to respond to. We need to respond to the proposal to put these giant turbines so close to our homes that they will impact our health. But until that necessity arises, there's no need to fret about it. What's that old prayer? It gets quoted a lot, it's almost cliched. God, grant me the wisdom to accept the things I cannot change.
It's the serenity prayer.
It's the serenity prayer, that's the one. And the wisdom to, no, it's God grant me the...
the serenity.
The serenity
To accept the
things I cannot change.
The courage to change the things I can.
That's it, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's it.